Hello everyone. So welcome to session 15 of IS Baba's rapid revision series of 500 high probable topics for prelims 2020. I'm Preetham Reddy and I will be dealing with 20 important topics which are very crucial for prelims examination in this year in this particular session. So first topic of the day is Red Panda. So already in topic number 95, that is recovery program for critically endangered species, I had discussed that 4 new species were recently added to this recovery program for critically endangered species. So right now the list has like 21 species under this recovery program. Okay, and the 4 new species were northern river terrapin, clouded leopard, Arabian sea humpback whale, red panda. So we have already dealt with the humpback whale. So we'll be dealing with red panda, clouded leopard and northern river terrapin. Okay, so first topic of the day is red panda. So red panda, you might be knowing, it is also called as lesser panda or red bear cat, and it is a mammal which is native to eastern Himalayas and southwestern China. So first thing what you have to remember is it is native to eastern Himalayas and southwest China. Okay, and IUCN is endangered, and this red panda, it is closely associated with montane forest with dense bamboo thicket. Okay, so wherever the dense bamboo forest or vegetation is found, especially in mountain forests, these pandas are found there. Okay, and these pandas are usually found in deciduous and coniferous forest of the eastern Himalayas. So you have to remember eastern Himalayas and southwestern China, and they are found in the deciduous and coniferous forests, and these red panda are endemic to the temperate forest of the Himalayas. So any statement can come like mountain forest, yes; deciduous and coniferous forest of the eastern Himalayas, yes; endemic to the temperate forest of the Himalayas, yes. Okay, and this red panda, it is found in Sikkim, West Bengal and Arunachal Pradesh. So in India it is found in Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh and West Bengal. Okay, and some unique characteristics of this red panda. So they are arboreal, so usually they live on the trees. Okay, they feed mainly on bamboos, but also eats eggs, birds, insects. They are solitary animal, they like to live alone, and they mainly active from dusk to dawn and largely sedentary during the day. So they keep sleeping during the daytime. So this red panda is kind of like my favorite animal because I can compare it with the students. Okay, most of the aspirants, they slept nicely during the lockdown. Now they are so much alert like this because next 20-30 days like we have prelims, right? So next important topic is clouded leopard. So clouded leopard, IUCN status is vulnerable. So clouded leopard was also added to that recovery program list. Okay, so it is IUCN vulnerable and also protected under CITES Appendix 1. Okay, and the habitat is forest and shrubland. So usually this clouded leopard, they prefer grasslands. Okay, they prefer grasslands, shrubs, subtropical and dense tropical forests up to height of 7,000 feet occurring from the Himalayan foothills through mainland Southeast Asia. Okay, so usually they are found in tropical and subtropical forests and up to the height of 7,000 feet. Okay, from Himalayan foothills. So usually they are found in eastern India and states like Sikkim, West Bengal, Meghalaya, Tripura, Mizoram, Manipur, Assam, Nagaland, Arunachal Pradesh, so almost all the northeastern states. And they are also found in 9 countries like Bhutan, Nepal, India, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos and Myanmar. That's the reason I said they are usually found in dense tropical forests up to the height of 7,000 feet occurring from the Himalayan foothills through mainland Southeast Asia. Okay, and in India usually these clouded leopards are found in Dampa Tiger Reserve, and Dampa Tiger Reserve in Mizoram, it has the highest population density of this clouded leopard. So you have to remember Dampa, and clouded leopard is state animal of Meghalaya. Okay, next important topic is northern river terrapin. See, northern river terrapin is important because it was added to the list of recovery program. At the same time, 2019, the World Turtle Day, it was like the spotlight was on freshwater turtles, and there were many Hindu articles in the newspaper that which dealt with the 5 important freshwater turtles. Okay, especially India's top 5 freshwater turtles, and which is among the world's 50 most threatened turtles. Okay, so we will be dealing with India's top 5 freshwater turtles, which are among the world's 50 most threatened turtles. Already we have dealt with marine turtles. Okay, so this year, these five out of these five, the first one and the fourth one are important because lot of articles have been dealt with regarding this one because it was recently added to the recovery program. So we'll see about northern river terrapin. So it is a critically endangered species. Red crowned roof turtle, it is a critically endangered species. South Asian narrow-headed soft-shell turtle, endangered species black soft-shell turtle, extinct in the wild. Asian giant soft-shell turtle, it is critically endangered. And this northern river terrapin is found in Sundarbans. Red crowned roofs found in National Chambal Sanctuary. And South Asian narrow-headed soft-shell turtle is found in Gangetic River system. These are extinct in the wild and they were recently found in some temple ponds in Assam and Bengal. And Asian giant soft-shell turtle found in eastern part of the country. Okay, see, even if you remember this particular table, it will help a lot. Maybe they can choose the correct pairs or match the following, and they might ask some turtles and the location or their IUCN status. Okay, so northern river terrapin, it is a critically endangered, and the habitat, as you can see in the map, they are found in Sundarban region, especially near the marine coast. Okay, and you can see this is in different color because it is extinct in both Myanmar and Thailand. So usually this northern river terrapin, they are found in marine or coastal and marine neritic zone, and also wetlands, in inland wetlands, and usually in freshwater ecosystem. Okay, so these are found in Bangladesh, Sundarban area, and Indian parts of Sundarban area, that is West Bengal and Odisha, as you can see here, right? And the scientific name of this northern river terrapin is Batagur basca. So next important turtle is red crowned roof turtle. So this red crowned roof turtle, it is found in India only within the National Chambal river sanctuary. And this red crowned roof turtle, they are found in Bangladesh, India and Nepal, and IUCN red list is critically endangered. So in India, this is found only within the National Chambal river sanctuary, and recently some breeding activities are taking place, like they are trying to breed this particular turtle species in Crocodile Bank Trust. Okay, so South Asian narrow-headed soft-shell turtle, they are found in Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Pakistan, and IUCN is endangered. Okay, so next important, as I said, like I am predicting this one, black soft-shell turtle. So it is found in Bangladesh and India, and it is extinct in the wild. But a few temple ponds in Assam and Bangladesh are bringing these turtles back from the brink. So recently in news they had provided this Hayagriva Madhav temple in Assam. So they found this black shell soft turtles, and Haduk Bill, which is a wetland of Pobitora Wildlife Sanctuary, also called as Mini Kaziranga. So even there, this black soft shell turtle are found. It is extinct in the wild. And Asian giant soft shell turtle, which is IUCN red list critically endangered, they are found in China, South Asia, Southeast Asia. Okay, so next important topics are, we will be dealing with the different types of bonds like sovereign bonds, sovereign gold bond scheme, government bonds for NRIs, additional tier or AT1 bonds, RBI savings bonds. Okay, so we'll deal with this. So obviously you should know the basics. So if you don't know the basic regarding the bonds, do read about the basics. Okay, so bonds, in simple, it is an instrument to borrow money. Okay, it is like an IOU. It's like IOU money back. Okay, so like that, it's an instrument to borrow money. A bond like could be floated, or it can be issued by a country's government or by a company to raise funds. Okay, so it can be floated, or it can be issued by government, or it can be by some company to raise the funds. So usually bonds are given to raise the funds. And since government bonds like the G6 in India, right, so government securities, they come with the sovereign's guarantee, that is government's guarantee, they are considered one of the safest investment. That's the reason usually the bonds, the government bonds G6, they give the lowest returns on the investment. So yield is low. Okay, whereas investments in corporate bonds tend to be riskier because the chances of failure and therefore the chances of the company not repaying the loans are higher. That's the reason the yield is high. Okay, so let's see about the sovereign bonds, which was recently released by the government. So these are government debt securities, and one important thing is they are issued in overseas market and in foreign currency denominations. Okay, so this is very important. They are issued in overseas market and also in foreign currency denominations such as like dollars, euros, yen. Okay, abhi tak or currently the government of India only used to issue bonds in the domestic market, and that too in rupees, to finance the deficit between its expenses and revenues. But now government is going for this sovereign bonds, that is government debt securities issued in overseas market, and that too in foreign currency denomination. Okay, so we'll see about this overseas sovereign bonds. So Indian government bonds, Indian government borrows from overseas markets, right, and in foreign currencies. And Indian sovereign bonds that will be floated in foreign countries, and they will be like denominated in foreign currencies. So it can be a floated type also, and both the initial loan amount and the final payment will be either in US dollars or some other comparable currency. So usually foreign currencies. So another important area what you have to know is what is the difference between the earlier GSEC and masala bonds. So masala bonds can be confusing. So I'm telling, like, usually in masala bonds what happens, like Indian entities and not the government. So that is the kind of point to be noted. So masala bonds, like the Indian entities, they can raise funds from the overseas. Okay, and they are doing it, they are raising this funds from the overseas in rupee terms. However, now in this sovereign bonds, India, like Indian government is raising money, okay, and in terms of foreign currency. Okay, and earlier whatever the GSEC was there, already I said those like government securities, Indian government used to raise loans within India and in Indian rupee. But now this is the difference. Okay, so keep note of this sovereign bonds, it can be important this year. Next is sovereign gold bond scheme 2020 to 2021. So recently sovereign gold bond scheme was launched. Don't get confused with the gold bond scheme of 2015. Okay, so it is almost like similar to that one. So sovereign gold bond scheme, here government of India in consultation with the RBI has decided to issue this sovereign gold bonds, and they are government securities and they are denominated in grams of gold. So here it is denominated in grams of gold, like in previous one it is denominated in foreign currency, here it is denominated in grams of gold. Okay, and they are substitutes for holding physical gold. So same like the gold bond scheme which was launched in November 2015 with the aim to reduce the demand for physical gold and also shift a part of domestic savings used for the purchase of gold into financial savings. So this particular government security, which is denominated in grams of gold, even this is acting as a substitute for holding physical gold. Okay, so we'll see regarding sovereign gold bond scheme. So they are issued by RBI on behalf of the government of India. See, we might get confused little bit because sovereign bonds and sovereign gold scheme, gold bond scheme, we'll think that maybe this is also allowing investors from overseas investors. Okay, however, here you have to note that eligibility for investment is strictly limited to the residents. Okay, so the sovereign gold bonds, they are restricted for the sale to the resident entities. So remember, resident entities. So it can be any individual, it can be any Indian entity like Hindu undivided families or some trusts or universities or charitable institutions. And the tenor of the bond will be for a period of 8 years with exit option in 5th, 6th and 7th year. And the maximum limit one can buy is 4 kg for the individual, 4 kg for Hindu undivided family, 20 kg for trusts and other entities. Okay, and bonds will be sold through banks, stockholding corporation of India, or designated post offices and national stock exchange or the Bombay Stock Exchange, either directly or through agents. And these bonds can be used as collateral for loans. So this is important, it can be used as collateral for loans. At the same time, these bonds can be tradable on stock exchanges. Okay, so these are important to note regarding sovereign gold bond scheme. Next important is government bonds for NRIs. Okay, so now government has decided to go with like raising money from the NRIs. So RBI to issue certain series of government securities under fully accessible route for NRIs. Okay, that is non-resident Indians. So we have to see how are these bonds different. So these special securities, they will attract no foreign portfolio investor limits. That is, since they are telling for fully accessible route, so now there will be no portfolio like foreign portfolio investor limits, and these are first step towards Indian G securities, that is government securities, being listed on global bond indices. And these shall also attract like access to some cheap liquidity in overseas market. So Indian G-Secs will be listed on global bond indices, and this will also access cheap liquidity in the overseas market, and this will also facilitate the inflow of stable foreign investment in Indian bonds. Okay, so one thing what we have to remember is this fully accessible route. See, the move follows the union budget announcement that certain specified categories of government bonds would be open fully for this NRIs without any restrictions. So under this FAR, that is fully accessible route, eligible investors can invest in specified government securities without being subject to any investment ceilings. So only the specified, not all government securities. Okay, and this scheme shall operate along with two existing routes, that is medium term framework and voluntary retention route, in which we have to remember voluntary retention route because this was also recently the government has provided. So under this voluntary retention route, what is happening, the foreign portfolio investors, they have been given greater operational flexibility in terms of instrument choices, besides some other exemptions from certain regulatory requirements. So just remember that they have been provided with greater operational flexibility. Okay, who? The foreign portfolio investors. Okay, see, all these government is doing just to encourage foreign portfolio investors to undertake long term investments in Indian debt markets. Okay, so this is what is important. So next important bond is additional tier 1 or AT1 bonds. Okay, so you would have read this bonds with respect to S Bank. Okay, you would have read in articles that S Bank's AT1 bond holders, they are in trouble, and this AT1 bond holders are said to have invested around like 10,800 crores or something, and this RBI's restructuring plan, it proposes to completely write off the dues on these bonds. Okay, and the Association of Mutual Funds in India has requested RBI and SEBI for a temporary write down of AT1 bonds of this S Bank instead of completely writing it off. That's why S Bank AT1 bond holders were in trouble. Okay, so we'll know about this additional tier 1 or AT1 bonds. Okay, see, these bonds are unsecured perpetual bonds. So this particular line is very important. So these are unsecured perpetual bonds and they carry no maturity date. Okay, see, I won't go explaining in detail, but you can read about it. Just know that AT1 bonds are a type of unsecured perpetual bonds that bank issue to shore up their core capital base to meet the Basel III norms. And under the Basel III norms, banks were asked to maintain a certain minimum level of capital and not lend all the money they receive from the depositors. Okay, and according to this Basel norms issued to the banks, so the bank's regulatory capital should be divided into tier 1 and tier 2, and under tier 1 it should be subdivided into common equity tier 1 and additional tier 1 capital. So AT1 bonds come under this tier 1 category, which is issued by Basel III norms, and common equity. So these two are the differences. So under common equity, it includes equity instruments where returns are linked to the bank's performance and therefore the performance of the share price, and they have no maturity. And additional tier 1, they are perpetual bonds which carry a fixed coupon payable annually from past or present profits of the bank, and even they have no maturity and their dividends can be cancelled at any time. Okay, in simple, remember AT1 bonds are like any other bonds issued by the banks and companies, but AT1 bonds pay a slightly higher rate of interest compared to other bonds. Why? Because these AT1 bonds are also listed and traded on the exchanges. So if an AT1 bond holder needs money, he can sell it in the secondary market. However, you have to note that investors cannot return these bonds to the issuing bank and get the money. Okay, that is, there is no put option available to its holder. Okay, so if they want to sell and if they want their money back, they have to sell it in the secondary market. They can't return it to the issuing bank and get back the money. So there is no put option available to its holder. However, the issuing bank have the option to recall all the AT1 bonds issued by them. Okay, so this is termed call options that allow banks to redeem them after 5 or 10 years. Okay, and banks issuing this AT1 bonds, they can skip interest payment for a particular year or even reduce the bonds face value. Okay, this is what is happening with the AT1 bondholders. And remember, these AT1 bonds are regulated by RBI. They are regulated by RBI. That's why this mutual fund association and others are requesting RBI and SEBI for a temporary write-off instead of going for a complete write-off. Okay, so AT1 bonds are regulated by RBI, and if RBI feels that a bank needs a rescue, it can simply ask the bank to write off its outstanding AT1 bonds without consulting its investors. Okay, so next important bond is like 7.75 RBI savings bonds 2018. See, why we have to read about this? Because recently government replaced this 7.75 RBI savings bonds with the new floating rate savings bond 2020. Okay, so now the government has discontinued this particular bond. So first we have to know about this bond in order to know about this particular new floating rate savings bond. So we'll see what is this 7.75 RBI savings bond. These were issued in 2018 and these were available for subscription to resident citizens. So again, it is for only the resident citizens to invest in a taxable bond. Okay, and these bonds were first introduced in 2013 in 2003 as 8% Government of India savings taxable bonds, and the interest rate was brought down to 7.75% in 2018. So initially it was 8%, now it is like 2018 May 7.75%, and now under this new floating rate savings bond, it has been decreased to 7.15%. Okay, so the interest rate is right now 7.15%, and one bond, the value of one bond was like 1000 rupees each, and the bonds had no maximum limit for investment. Okay, and the bonds had a 7-year lock-in period from the date of issue, and if in case we want any premature encashment, it is permitted only to those individuals who are senior citizens or like who were 60 years and above. And interest of these bonds is taxable under Income Tax Act. Okay, now there is the new floating rate savings bond tax, which actually replaced this 7.75 RBI savings bond. Now this one will be also issued by RBI on behalf of Government of India, and the interest rate is 7.15%. Okay, and these bonds are also, it is held by person resident in India. So it is again for the resident in India. So NRIs cannot invest in these bonds. Okay, and there will be no maximum limit for investment in the bonds. The minimum investment starts with 1000 rupees and then in multiples of rupees 1000 thereof. Okay, and the interest on the bonds is payable half yearly, and the bonds shall be repayable on the expiration of 7 years. See, the difference between the earlier and this one, both have lock-in period of 7 years. And premature encashment, again here it is like decided by the government, so usually senior citizens go. And but the difference is here, the interest on the bonds is payable every 6 months of yearly. Okay, that is, the interest rate on these bonds will be reset every 6 months. So there is no option to pay interest on cumulative basis, that is, interest will be payable every 6 months instead of having an option to receive it at maturity. Okay, and the bonds will be issued only in the form of bond ledger account, and may be held at the credit of the holder in an account called bond ledger account, and the investors will be issued a certificate of holding for the same. Okay, and applications will be received at branches of SBI, nationalized banks, and some specified private sector banks. Okay, and interest on these bonds will be taxable on the Income Tax Act 1961, and these bonds shall not be tradable in the secondary market, and they shall not be eligible as collateral for loans. So that is the difference between the other government securities and this one. So these cannot be tradable in the secondary market, nor these are eligible as collateral for loans. Okay, so next important topic is console bonds. See, this console bonds was in news because recently in 2014 the government, British government, okay, almost a century after the start of First World War, it paid out 10% of the total outstanding console bond debt. Okay, so these console bonds were first used, or it was used as early as the First World War. Okay, see what is happening with this console bonds is some country or some nations, they can ask their citizens to invest, okay, during like to invest their money, or governments can sort their citizens to raise more money to finance the ongoing cost for like war. Okay, so this console bond, the British that time, it sought to raise money from its citizens to finance the ongoing cost of the First World War, and it promised to pay out interest of 5%. Okay, and citizens were asked to invest with the advertising message, like British had told, like, if you cannot fight, you can help your country by investing all you can, like in this 5% exchequer bonds. Okay, so unlike the soldier, the investors run no risk because they will be getting this 5% interest. Okay, so this consoles was a name given to certain government debt issues in the form of perpetual bonds, redeemable at the option of the government. So again, it's like that 81 bonds. Okay, so these are also console bonds or like perpetual bonds, and they are redeemable at the option of the government. Okay, so the drawback is it is not redeemable whenever we want it, and they were issued by the US government and also the Bank of England. Okay, and it is a fixed income security with no maturity date. So this console bonds act as a fixed income security with no maturity date, and this type of bond is often considered type of equity rather than a debt. Okay, and one major drawback to these types of bonds is they are not redeemable. However, the major benefit is that they pay a steady stream of interest payments forever. Okay, so you might be knowing about console bond. And next important topic is Korvai and Sangudi. Okay, this Korvai, it is an ancient weaving technique of Tamil Nadu, especially associated with Kanjipuram silk saris. Okay, so this Korvai, it is a labor intensive process because it requires two weavers to handle the shuttles of the loom. And this Korvai, it is the hallmark of this Kanjipuram sari. Okay, I think Kanjipuram sari has GI tag, and this Korvai is a hallmark of this Kanjipuram sari. And Korvai is a design which connects the heavier ply of sari borders or zari borders to the body of the sari. Okay, so in this technique, what they are doing is the body of the sari is woven separately and the border separately on body of the sari is woven separately and the borders separately on the same loom, and later on the two are interlinked by skillful weaving, that is called Korvai. And Sangudi was also in use. So it is a cotton fabric of Madurai. So this particular Sangudi, it is an exclusive textile product which were traditionally produced using tie and dye, that is using natural dyes. And this Sangudi is a method by this Saurashtrians who migrated to Madurai under the patronage of King Tirumalai Naikar during the 17th century. Okay, so remember it. And the fabrics traditional popular uses like cotton saris or cotton shirts, salwars, shawls, handbags, pillow covers, bed sheets, etc. And this product has also received GI registration, or like the product has been given protection under the GI Registration Act. So next important topic is Mudiyattu and Theyyam. So Mudiyattu, it is a traditional ritual theatre and folk dance drama from Kerala. So you have to remember, it is a ritual theatre and folk dance drama from Kerala that enacts the mythological tale of a battle between goddess Kali and the demon Darika. Okay, and this dance is performed usually in Bhadrakali temples. Okay, and the ritual is a part of Bhagavati or Bhadrakali cult. And this Mudiyattu is also part of UNESCO's representative list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity. So already I had covered regarding this ICH, UNESCO's ICH. Okay, so Mudiyattu is provided in that one. We can expect a question on this. So in 2010, Mudiyattu was inscribed in the UNESCO's representative list of the ICH of humanity, becoming the second art from Kerala after Kudiyattam. Okay, so Kudiyattam and Mudiyattu. Okay, Theyyam was also in news. So Theyyam is a popular ritual form of worship in Kerala, and predominantly it is in like some areas like Wayanad, Kasargod, Kannur districts. Okay, so it is a popular ritual form of worship in Kerala, and it is usually performed mainly by males, except the Devakuttu Theyyam. Okay, so Devakuttu Theyyam is performed only by the women, and this Theyyam like it is performed only on the Tenkubad Kollam temple. Okay, so maybe like they might ask questions like this. So next important thing is Chaukandi Stupa. Okay, so this Chaukandi Stupa, it is a Buddhist stupa in Sarnath. Many of you might have visited and you might be knowing. So it's an ancient Buddhist site in Uttar Pradesh, Sarnath, known as this Chaukandi Stupa, and it has been declared to be a protected area of national importance by Archaeological Survey of India. So in 2018, ASI declared this monument as a national importance. Okay, and this Chaukandi Stupa is thought originally to have built as a terrace temple during the Gupta period, that is during 4th and 6th century, to mark the site where Lord Buddha and his first disciples met traveling from Bodh Gaya to Sarnath. Okay, so this particular stupa, the major significance is it is believed that this is the site where Lord Buddha and his first disciples met traveling from Bodh Gaya to Sarnath, and later Govardhan, that is the son of Raja Todarmal, he modified this stupa to its present shape by building the octagonal tower. Okay, so Raja this Govardhan, who is son of Raja Todarmal, he modified the stupa to its present shape, which you can see it in the figure, by building it in the octagonal tower, and it was done to commemorate the visit of Humayun, the powerful Mughal ruler. Okay, and stupas have evolved from burial mounds, and they serve as a shrine for a relic of the Buddha. So you might be knowing. So you have to know about the structure. Okay, so this particular Chaukandi Stupa, it is a lofty mound of brick, whose square edifice is surrounded by an octagonal tower. Some images of Buddha and other statues were also found during the excavation of this Chaukandi Stupa, and they are said to be rare artifacts and classic examples of art from the Gupta period. Okay, and this Chaukandi Stupa is said to be originally a terrace temple, okay, constructed during the Gupta period, as I said before. And major significance is it was built to mark the place where Lord Buddha met his first disciples as he traveled from Bodh Gaya to Sarnath. So next important topic is Gumot. Okay, so this Gumot, recently, like art and culture minister of Goa, he announced that this Gumot, which is an indigenous earthen drum, okay, and which uses the skin of monitor lizard. So monitor lizard skin is stretched across the pot's mouth, so you can see here. So it is used to make this earthen drum. Okay, so recently the Goa's art and culture minister, he notified that he will make this Gumot as the heritage instrument of Goa. Okay, so this indigenous earthen drum is said to become the heritage instrument of Goa. However, he said instead of this skin of monitor lizard, right, they will go for other alternative. Okay, so we'll see that. So now this Gumot is a percussion instrument. Okay, and it is usually widely they are played during the Ganesh Chaturthi aartis and all. Okay, and this Gumot is banned. Why? Because obviously it is using the skin of monitor lizard, and monitor lizard is classified as an endangered wildlife species. Okay, and it was listed in Schedule 1 of Wildlife Protection Act, and Gumot was banned by the Forest Department of Goa also. And in recent years, attempts are made to revive this particular heritage instrument by replacing monitor lizard skin with the skin of a she goat. Okay, and this revival has spiked the interest about the instrument, and taking forward the efforts to conserve the heritage musical instrument, the government of Goa is taking steps to declare this Gumot as the heritage musical instrument of Goa. Okay, so next important topic is the final topic, that is Nagardan excavations. So Nagardan excavations and Nagardan fort and Vakataka dynasty and associated Queen Prabhavati Gupta. Okay, so recently you might have read in news like archaeological excavations were carried out at this Nagardan Nagardan fort, which is in Nagpur, Maharashtra. Okay, so the area surrounding the Nagardan fort in the village has the archaeological remains, and Nagardan fort was constructed during the Gond Raja period. Okay, it was constructed during the Gond Raja period, and later it was reused by the these Bosales, okay, or Bosles of Nagpur during the late 18th and 19th century. And the excavations have provided evidence on the life, religious affiliations and trade practices of this Vakataka dynasty. So we'll try to know about this Vakataka dynasty, and this Nagardan is understood to have served as a capital during the Vakataka kingdom. Okay, so Vakatakas, they ruled central and south India. Okay, so they ruled central and south India during the 3rd and 5th centuries. Okay, and Nagardan, which is near Pune, it served as the capital of the Vakataka kingdom. And the major findings of this archaeological excavation was, first time clay ceilings have been excavated from Nagardan, and they are telling it belonged to the period when Prabhavati Gupta was the queen of the Vakataka dynasty. So they have found a clay ceiling which is almost like 1500 years old, and it bears the queen name in Brahmi script along with the description of conch. So the presence of the conch is regarded as a sign of the Vaishnava affiliation that the Guptas held. Okay, also there was an idol of Lord Ganesha which has no ornaments adorned. So this was also found from the site. Okay, so what is important here to note is regarding the Queen Prabhavati Gupta and her role. Okay, so she is considered as daughter, like she is the daughter of Chandragupta II and granddaughter of Samudragupta. Okay, and Vakataka rulers of central India forged several matrimonial alliances with the Guptas of North India so as to maintain harmonious relations. So that time this Prabhavati Gupta, who was from the Gupta kingdom, she got married with the Vakataka rulers. So Prabhavati Gupta married Vakataka king Rudrasena II, and she enjoyed the position of chief queen. So after sudden death of the king, this queen Prabhavati Gupta only ruled for about 10 years until her son Pravarasena II succeeded. And Vakataka rulers, they followed the Shaivism, whereas these Guptas were staunch followers of Vaishnavites. Okay, and this Queen Prabhavati, she played a vital role or pivotal role in propagation of Vaishnava practices in the Vidarbha region of the Maharashtra. So this is what the significance of Queen Prabhavati. So try to know all these topics, do revise. Okay, we'll meet in next session. Thank you guys. Do subscribe and do comment if you have any queries. Thank you.